This is the story of Susan Multanen, a woman who was shot in the chest and called 911 on the fateful night of May 14, 2010 in Pierce County, Washington, USA. Her voice, eerily calm, betrayed nothing of the horror she had just endured. Within the next 20 minutes, before she took her last breath, Susan revealed a dark secret about the person who attacked her, opened up a horrifying case that left the community and law enforcement reeling. Before delving into the details of the case, we need to understand the background and those involved. First, we have Monty Multanen, 70, and his wife, Susan Multanen, 65. They were an elderly couple living in a peaceful area of Pierce County, Washington. Monty and Susan Multanen were known as kind-hearted people who always cared for those around them. They lived a simple and loving life. Monty and Susan were not only exemplary parents but also took in many foster children, creating a warm and loving family. Everyone knew them as friendly and kind neighbors. Monty and Susan often gifted beautiful flowers from their garden to neighbors. They usually were bouquets of roses along with a note explaining their whereabouts whenever they left town. Sarah Myron, Monty and Susan's daughter, was married to Alan Myron. They had 3 kids. One of them was the intelligent 15-year-old girl, Kristen Myron. Alan was an experienced deputy sheriff, highly regarded by his colleagues and the community. He had served in the police force for 11 years and during that time, had only been disciplined once for not being courteous in responding to a police call. He was a competent and trusted officer. Alan was widely regarded as a fierce advocate for victims of domestic violence. He had been working closely with the family of well-known domestic violence victims. Alan also sent emails to express his commitment to the cause of preventing this pervasive issue, pushing for harsher penalties for abusers, and championing stronger programs to prevent such tragedies. On that fateful day in May, the Multanens departed without a notice to the neighbors. So what went so terribly wrong? The first sign of the unfolding tragedy came when a 911 call was placed by Tom Stevens, a neighbor who stumbled upon bleeding Susan Multanen in his backyard. His voice, filled with urgency, conveyed the grim reality: she had been shot in the chest and was rapidly losing blood. As Susan's life slipped away, the puzzle pieces she provided would reveal a dark and disturbing truth, one that would turn the investigation on its head and force the community to confront a nightmare they never saw coming.
911, we're reporting.
I'd like to report gunshot wound.
Someone got shot where?
Below her chest on...
Okay, but where's she at?
9922 58th Street, Northwest.
Okay.
As the report was being made, Susan remained conscious, her voice steady as she recounted the horror that had unfolded. Susan disclosed that her husband had also been shot, though his whereabouts were unknown.
So do you know where she was when this occurred?
She's saying it's Deputy Myron's house.
So, Deputy Myron's house?
Yes.
Is she Deputy Myron's wife?
What's your relation to Deputy Myron? Mother-in-law. Man, move back towards me, please.
Okay, does she know who shot him?
Deputy Myron.
This is Deputy Myron's mother-in-law?
Yes.
And Deputy Myron shot her?
And Deputy Myron shot you? Yes.
That's when the shocking truth hit them. The woman lying before them was Deputy Myron's mother-in-law, and the shooter was none other than the deputy sheriff himself. The realization sent a wave of disbelief through the team. But the situation grew even more dire. No one knew where Deputy Myron had gone, and an even more pressing fear gripped them: the safety of his wife, Sarah, was now in grave question. Few minutes later, Kristen, Alan Myron's 15-year-old daughter, also dialed 911 after witnessing her father commit the unthinkable, shooting her grandmother in cold blood. Terrified, Kristen had hidden in the basement of their home during the chaos. She recounted to dispatchers that she had been napping when the sound of gunfire jolted her awake. The Multanens had shared a deep bond with Myron. Not only were they close to their daughter, but they had also shown Myron great kindness. Susan would bake his favorite snack whenever they visited him in Gig Harbor. Myron had even named his yellow Labrador, Monty, after his father-in-law. And when Myron was placed on light duty, the Multanens had been quick to offer financial support to his family. However, Susan revealed that she and Monty had come to Pierce County to stay with the Myrons due to the deteriorating relationship between their daughter and Alan. She bravely shared that Deputy Myron had been an abusive husband for some time, a darkness that had already driven a wedge between him and his children. It turned out one of Myron's daughters had been suffering from an eating disorder and depression. That poor girl tried to commit suicide, and luckily, their parents found out and brought her to the hospital. The day before the massacre, Sarah Myron had reached out to her husband's immediate supervisor, expressing deep concern over his erratic behavior during a visit to the hospital where she and their older daughter were staying. Myron had appeared unexpectedly, and his anger flared when they refused to see him. This was far from an isolated incident. Neighbors had called 911 multiple times over the past 4 to 5 years, reporting the loud arguments emanating from the Myron home. Yet rather than officers being dispatched, the issues were dismissed and resolved over the phone. Little did anyone know that the passionate domestic violence advocate would become the monster he once vowed to fight against. In a devastating twist, Alan revealed to be a longtime perpetrator himself. On May 14, 2010, Monty and Susan Multanen visited their daughter Sarah Myron. It was a family visit like any other, but no one could have predicted that it would be the last time they would be alive. Sarah was at St. Francis Hospital in Federal Way, tending to one of their sick children. This fortunate twist of fate meant she had been spared from witnessing Alan's deadly rampage. The other 2 children, too, were away from home when the shootings occurred, narrowly escaping the horror. That afternoon, a major argument broke out between Alan and Monty. Alan Myron, in a fit of rage and unable to control himself, took a gun and shot Monty Multanen in the driveway. Monty was attacked unexpectedly and had no time to defend himself. Alan then coldly informed Susan that he had killed her husband before turning the gun on her and shooting her in the chest. However, he could never imagine that she was still alive. At 68 years old, with a severely gunshot wound, Susan had summoned the strength to drag herself all the way from her son-in-law Alan Myron's house, crawl through the woods, desperate for help. She finally reached the neighbor's house, Tom Stevens. Tom immediately called 911 and provided his exact location and gauged the distance from Deputy Myron's residence. But Stevens could only offer one chilling detail: he had found the wounded woman collapsed in his driveway. He had no idea what was happening to other victims. Despite the searing pain from the gunshot wound in her chest, Susan Multanen wasted no time to speak to the dispatchers with a voice that was both calm and clear. Her composure in the face of such agony was nothing short of remarkable, a testament to her strength even in her final moments.
Okay, where's the father-in-law at? Is he still over at 1008?
I have no idea.
Can the lady, let me talk to the lady.
She thinks that he's in the driveway
He's in the driveway? Of your house?
of their house, of Deputy Myron's house.
Hello? Hi, this is the dispatcher at the Sheriff's Department. What's your name? Susan Multanen, M-U-L-T-A-N. Okay, Susan. Did Deputy Myron shoot you and your husband? Yes. Okay, where did he go? Is he still at the house? What? Is he still at the house? I don't know, because I crawled through the woods and got away from there. Okay, so the last time you saw him, he was inside the house?
Well, I was upstairs in an upstairs apartment that's over the garage,
Okay.
and I crawled out the back way through the woods. I came over here, this is 2 houses down.
It would later come to light that Susan had provided the dispatchers with crucial information, everything they needed to unravel the case. But the most pressing issue remained. No one knew where Myron had vanished. As dispatchers rushed to the scene, they frantically worked to determine if anyone else was still in the house with him. If there was, it meant that another life was hanging by a thread, in imminent danger of becoming the next victim of Myron's deadly rampage. The clock was ticking, and every second could mean the difference between life and death. In a remarkable display of courage, Susan answered the dispatcher's questions with unwavering resolve, despite her critical condition. She calmly informed that her granddaughter Kristen Myron and her friend Sarah were sleeping upstairs, trapped in the house with the madman. They might be dragged down in the driveway. Alan had a police car and an older grayish sedan with 4 doors. He might be using his own daughter as a hostage, potentially to make his escape. The police, now on high alert, suspected that Myron might follow the blood trail to search for the disappeared Susan. Fearing the worst, Stevens quickly acted. He locked them both in the back room of the house, plunging them into darkness as they waited, hearts pounding, uncertain of what Myron's next move would be. Once the police discovered Susan in her neighbor's location, she was urgently airlifted to the nearest hospital, Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. Tragically, she didn't survive, turning Alan's crime into a double murder. Kristen, Alan Myron's 15-year-old daughter, was napping when a shooting sound waked her up. Rushing upstairs, she was met with a horrific sight, her father standing over her bloody grandmother, and coldly informing her that her grandfather Monty was dead. Alan then dragged Monty's lifeless body into the garage before turning his twisted attention to his daughter. He ordered Kristen to leave the apartment with him and head to the main house. As they walked, Alan, consumed by rage, blamed the entire incident on his wife, accusing her of ignoring his calls and texts and refusing to speak to him when he had arrived at the hospital earlier that day. Once inside the main house, Alan took Kristen to the master bedroom, where he frantically tried to contact his wife, who remained completely unaware of the horrors unfolding at home. After multiple failed attempts to reach her, he ordered Kristen to lock herself in the basement. Alan then barricaded himself in the master bedroom, armed with a shotgun, which he chillingly told his daughter was intended for himself. As Kristen hid in the basement, a 22-year-old friend of the family, unaware of the bloodshed, visited Alan home. The friend found Kristen in the basement, where the horrifying reality of what had happened became clear. In a desperate attempt to defuse the situation, the friend and Kristen went upstairs to try and calm Alan down. But their pleas fell on deaf ears. Alan, unyielding and dangerous, demanded them return to the basement. A few minutes later, the house was surrounded by police, and a tense hostage negotiation began. The stakes were high, and with a heavily armed Alan inside, the outcome was uncertain. The lives of those inside hung in the balance as the situation reached its critical peak. The initial goal was to convince Alan Myron to release his daughter and the family friend from the house. After tense negotiations and back-and-forth exchanges, he finally agreed, allowing them to leaving him alone inside. For the next 2.5 hours, negotiators engaged in a delicate dance with Myron, urging him to surrender. However, the situation was precarious. No one knew how many weapons he had access to, making a forced entry too dangerous. As a seasoned cop, Myron was well versed in police tactics and was monitoring the police scanners, occasionally responding to the officers on the other end. One deputy cautioned over the radio, "Assume he's got his radio on. We're not going to slip anything past him." For the next 7 agonizing hours, Myron aired his grievances to the police. He lamented his dissatisfaction with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, particularly after an injury 2 years prior had relegated him to light duty. But his main focus, his obsession, was the crumbling state of his marriage. Myron blamed his in-laws for turning his wife against him, believing they were the root cause of all his marital problems. His rage culminated in a shocking confession: he had killed the Multanens because they had interfered in his relationship, meddling where they didn't belong. The tension reached its breaking point around 10 p.m. that night when deputies surrounding the house heard a muffled gunshot. The Tacoma police took control of the scene, and the SWAT team stormed in, only to find Myron dead. 4 weapons lay near his body: a shotgun, a rifle, and 2 handguns, though it was unclear which one he had used to end his life. Alan's death was not only the end of a man who had lost control but also the culmination of a series of tragedies within the Myron family. What happened that day left not only a deep pain for the family but also shocked the entire community in Pierce County. Alan Myron had been a trusted and respected deputy sheriff, known for his dedication to the community. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm had been brewing, one that would ultimately lead to a tragic and violent end. Everyone who knew Alan Myron seemed to echo the same sentiment: he appeared to have the perfect life. But beneath the surface, something far darker was brewing, something no one saw coming. The most shocking irony of all was that Myron was widely regarded as a fierce advocate for victims of domestic violence. Yet he became a perpetrator at the center of a domestic violence crisis within his own home. The case sparked a wave of outrage and concern within the community, particularly regarding the issue of domestic violence and how those in authority can sometimes misuse their power to cover up their wrongdoing. Unbeknownst to Sarah Myron, just an hour after her parents were killed, she also contacted a domestic violence detective, desperate for help. She scheduled an appointment for Monday, May 17, 2010, a date that would tragically come too late. The Myron family, especially Sarah and her children, endured immense emotional trauma. Losing her parents and facing the truth that her husband was the one responsible for their deaths pushed Sarah into a state of severe mental breakdown. Myron's 15-year-old daughter was too traumatized to speak with the police. To protect the family's privacy, their identities and whereabouts were kept confidential from the public. This case also raised many questions about how the police force handles internal issues, particularly those related to domestic violence. Many wondered whether this tragedy could have been prevented if Alan Myron had been recognized earlier as a domestic abuser. This led to significant debate about the need for stricter measures to monitor and address violent behavior within the police force. Moreover, the case attracted widespread attention from the media and the public. Numerous articles, TV programs, and documentaries were produced to analyze the case. Organizations advocating for the rights of women and children spoke out, calling for special attention to cases of domestic violence occurring in families connected to law enforcement. They argued that the police's failure to intervene promptly and recognize the signs of domestic violence had contributed to this tragedy. This case also prompted authorities to reconsider policies related to domestic violence. Many called for stricter regulations to protect the victims, especially in cases involving law enforcement officers. Alan Myron's case became a prime example of the hidden dangers of domestic violence and the importance of timely intervention. It also reminded us that domestic violence is not just a personal issue but a community problem, and we all have a responsibility to protect those around us from these dangers. After the incident, many psychologists began analyzing Alan Myron's psychology to understand better the motives behind his actions. One of the critical factors they identified was that Alan had been under immense pressure from both his work and family life. However, instead of seeking help, Alan kept his problems to himself and gradually fell into an unstable mental state. Work-related stress may have played a significant role in causing Alan's psychological instability. As a deputy sheriff, Alan faced daily challenges and stress. The job of a police officer demands not only physical endurance but also mental resilience. They often confront tense, dangerous situations and sometimes make life-or-death decisions. These pressures can accumulate over time, especially when there is a lack of necessary mental support from family and colleagues. Another factor identified by psychologists was the imbalance of power in Alan's relationship with his family. Alan always wanted to control everything around him, from his work to his personal life. However, when he could not achieve that, he became frustrated and angry. This led to his violent behavior, particularly when he felt betrayed or threatened. Alan's motive for the crime was not just about controlling his family but also about his anger and frustration over feeling betrayed. Alan believed that his in-laws had interfered in his marriage, causing his wife to turn against him. This may have been the main reason why Alan decided to kill them. However, this also indicates a severe psychological decline, where Alan could no longer distinguish right from wrong and chose a violent path to resolve his issues. Another factor identified by psychologists was Alan's arrogance and sense of helplessness in dealing with personal issues. Alan may have felt that he could not control his life and that everything was slipping away from him. This helplessness may have made him feel threatened, and he reacted by using violence as a way to reassert control. Some experts also suggested that Alan might have experienced a psychological breakdown due to a combination of factors, including work-related stress, family pressure, and feelings of isolation. These factors could have accumulated over time, eventually leading to his loss of control and violent actions. On May 16, 2010, the community gathered to mourn the tragic loss of the Multanen couple, grappling with the grim reality that Alan Myron, once respected by his community and colleagues, became a murderer because he could not control himself. This case serves as a powerful reminder that no one is immune to domestic violence and that we must all remain vigilant and recognize the signs of violence to intervene promptly. Through this case, we also see that no one can predict the tragedies that can happen in a family, even in those that seem the most peaceful. Education and raising awareness about domestic violence, along with timely support from the community and authorities, are crucial in preventing similar tragedies in the future. This case also reminds us that we must always care for and support those around us, especially those at risk of being affected by domestic violence. Only with care and support from the community can victims of domestic violence find safety and peace in their lives. Finally, we want to thank you for watching this video. If you found this video helpful, please like and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming true crime stories. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments below about this case and what you think could have been done to prevent this tragedy. Stay safe, and see you in the next video.